So I'll try to keep this short, energized, and interesting at the same time. My topic is talking about 60 mil annual revenue in e-commerce, but before that, we have very important thing to do. When I speak, I like to understand the audience that I'm speaking to, right? So let's do a quick survey and help me understand who you guys are, right? So I'll name a definition of people, and please just raise your hand, right? So then I could adjust the way I'm speaking or information that I'm sharing more relevant to you guys, right? So brands owners, couple hands. Okay, cool, thank you. Whenever I do this, I always feel like, fuck, what if they're not gonna raise their hands? You know, I'm like, shit, would be fucked, right? Okay, agency owners. Some hands, okay. C-level executives of any sorts? Okay, are there any people that are know-how related to e-commerce? Okay, cool. Right, let's get this off. Thank you. This is what you will not hear me speaking in this presentation. Short summary is I don't like all of the guru bullshit things, you know? I don't like coming from a perspective where I'm trying to give you a shortcut, right? Because in reality, I believe that there is no shortcut to a sustainable long-term success, right? It's gonna take hustle, it's gonna take effort, it's gonna take commitment. It will even take some level of obsession to get there, right? What I want to focus on is what I believe are the three most important high-level pillars that will make your chances of scaling to similar numbers more achievable, right? So number one, measuring buying intent that defines investment timing. So we'll basically talk about timing and how can you understand when is the right time to push or hold your investment ahead of time, all right? Being proactive. Number two, adapting innovation to quality of traffic and quality of attention. Number three, successful business design and KPIs, right? So you might be wondering, you know, who the fuck is this guy, right? So here's a short presentation about me. Chief Growth Officer at Sugitan, AKA your girlfriend's favorite growth officer. Inside joke, how friends and family used to call me. We have some numbers here of some achievements. What really matters is that, you know, all of these achievements are always team's effort, so all credit goes to my team. The definition that I like to say about me is that I'm a person that likes to ask difficult questions, and more importantly, ask questions that do not have answers, right? Because this is what I believe makes us to excel to the highest possible levels, right? So, actually, before we start, I want to play a quick game for you, right? Because I know it's been a long day, you're probably tired or whatever, so I want to offer you some gifts if you'll participate in this game that I want to play, right? So I'm gonna do my presentation, I'll talk about things, blah, 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 right? My condition is that if at any point of this presentation, you're gonna find something valuable to yourself, something that, you know, really syncs with you, what I want you to do is take a picture of the stage, of that exact moment of the presentation where you found the value, right? And post it somewhere, post it anywhere, wherever you want to post it, tag me. You'll find my tags at the end of this presentation. And 3 of you, whoever does this randomly, you'll get a 1-hour consultation completely for free from me and my team, right? So the value of the gift that you'll be receiving is $1K. Only do this if you will find something valuable during this presentation, right? So let's start at the beginning. Measuring buying intent that defines investment timing. All right, so buying intent, what we mean by buying intent is defining different time frames that shows how willing people are to buy at that certain moment of time, right? How I define it in my head very simply is that there's always periods of time where people are opening their wallets, right? And there's periods of time where they're closing their wallets, right? Big question that we always ask is, you know, how can we know this ahead of time? This has been my obsession for the last 3 to 4 years. I always knew deep inside that if we can somehow master the understandment of timing, we can do such a great things, right? By being proactive and knowing how can we push our money ahead of time, right? So, how we do it. The reality, you can read some information here, but the reality is that it took me around 3 years of analyzing hundreds of Shopify stores, right? And beginning, I didn't know this, right? I was just analyzing revenues and analyzing stores, but what I would do is I would take the lifetime history of the Shopify store and just write down every month's revenue, year over year, doesn't matter how many years there is. And I started noticing patterns. I was like, what the fuck, why do I see a different similar percentages of how revenue is shifting from month to month, There has to be something in it, So I kept digging. And the next thing is I've built a system. I've built an average percentage movement. Well, it sucks that you cannot see shit probably in the screen, but I'll quickly try to walk you through this. Basically, what this is, we're going to look at two scenarios, so we can first see how the graphs are different, right? But what this is data from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Shopify stores and calculating averages of percentage movements of revenue levels from one month to another, right? And interesting part is that if we're not encountering big events that can manipulate the percentage, so those big events can be, doing product launch, right? Or doing, getting viral ad, which will, give you like $1 million or $2 million, $3 million revenue in upcoming 6 months, right? If we're not encountering any of the outside big factors that manipulates this fits majority of the e-commerce stores, right? So what I want to do here with you is play a little game, right? This scenario right here builds you a graph of how the revenue would be moving based on data if we're trying to hit the monthly ROAS goal. If you take the picture, maybe you could see the percentages, but if no, just after the presentation, somehow contact me, I'll send this over to you because this is very valuable, right? The way we build our projections, right, and the base minimum goals that we need to hit is based on these percentage movements, right? But when it gets interesting, really interesting, is when we shift our MER or ROAS KPIs from monthly to quarterly, right? What we do in a scenario like this is we use MER or ROAS KPI as a lever to pull at certain moments or certain months per year in order to be able to achieve a higher revenue point at that exact moment, right? Because the philosophy is that we know the percentages, we know how percentages needs to be moving. This is always going to be our goal, right? So if let's say from December to January, on average, we're dropping 30%, right? The more I'll make in December means the higher the target of January is going to be, right? Simple. We apply the same percentages. So this scenario, what it does here is that in particular 3 months per year, we're using ROAS as a lever to decrease the KPI in order to push more acquisitions, right? What it does for us is it enables us to achieve a higher revenues on those particular months, and then automatically the sequence of another 3 to 6 months makes a big difference in revenue because, if we would get into LTV, retention, and all of those things, the machine starts going, right, once you hit a certain level of acquisition. So those 3 months that I want to talk about is going to be January, July, and October, right? January, if you're not selling new year, new me shit, it's going to be a decrease, right? We all know this. So January is where we change our ROAS KPI at break-even. If we have enough cash flow, we can even be a little bit negative in order to do more revenue so that eventually February's revenue would also be higher, right? The next example is July. Again, very similar situation. If you're not selling bikinis or whatever, something seasonal for summer, most likely July is also going to be a tougher month for you. So idea is identically the same, right? We just need to keep our revenue base higher than what it normally would by reducing the ROS, so that automatically the transition to August and September would be higher, right? Third month is October. So this is where we want to invest more before November, December to pre-buy more traffic, to do lead gen or whatever, and be able to, again, use that as additional capital that we can burn in this particular month and then move to the next month higher. So sucks that you cannot see the percentages, but whoever wants this, I'll send this over to you and you can take a look. On high level, what this means is, let's just look at total revenue. So this is basically playing a scenario where in both months we start at 100K, right? And we apply the same percentages. The end result is pretty big, right? From 1.4 million to 2.3 million while doing the same ROAS. And the only difference is just using ROAS or MER as a lever that you can pull to make sure that your revenue goes higher at the end of the year. So summary is that, again, the idea is that it's percentages over dollar values. Dollar values don't really matter as long as you know how the buying power is moving month after month, by what percentage it's moving. This is always going to be your base goal, no matter what, right? And then eventually when you have, let's say, viral ad or whatever, the dollar value at a particular month is going to be manipulated to a higher level, right? But after that, when you go back to business as usual, the percentages as bare basic goal will remain the same, right? Now, we looked at the annual perspective, and maybe it can be a little bit complicated. So what I want to do is do a simpler version of weekly buying power example, right? So we can look at the percentages. Pretty simple. From Sunday to Monday, we go down average 30%. Monday, Tuesday, we stay the same. Then we start climbing up. And Saturday to Sunday, we again remain the same, right? Now, what this means is that if we have some sort of a benchmark or a KPI to understand how we need to manage our budget for tomorrow or for 2 days or 3 days after tomorrow, this means that we start being proactive and not reactive when managing budgets, right? So we say play offense, not defense. What this means is that majority of, let's say, media buyers or ad buyers, they're going to manage the budget based on whatever is happening in the present. And if you're doing that, in my perspective, you're already losing, right? So you're either losing ROAS in present or you're not scaling as high as you could because you're already too late, right? We will outscale media buyers like this, an example, every single time because we follow the benchmarks, right, that we know, the benchmarks that decides how the buying power is moving, right, and we adjust the budgets day before that, or even sometimes 2 or 3 days before that, right? So here you can take a picture. It's going to be interesting for you to look at it later. What I did is I tried to translate those percentages into an actual scenario, right? So we're going to through a 2-week cycle, right? Just to show you the difference of how the scale on a weekly level would happen if we would be applying those percentages. Now, again, very important to see that there are 2 days with different ROASes, right? So you remember on an annual chart, I was talking about January, July, and October as those months where we're using the MER as lever. On a weekly window, we use also 2 days when we are manipulating the MER as a lever, right? So Wednesday is when in our workflow, we start majority of the creative testing, majority of the ad buying testing, whatever. So we, of course, increase the spend, but because we start so many tests at one day, we're okay with losing a little bit of money or a little bit of profits, right? So that's how we make sure that the speed of execution is there while maintaining or increasing the revenues at a lower ROAS, right? Then automatically, Sunday is the day where we know, okay, I've been scaling 3-4 days in a row, right? And I know that on Monday, I need to downscale because the buying power is gonna go down. So my goal on Monday is gonna be to protect the ROAS, right? That's basically the main reason why from Saturday to Sunday, we're not scaling. Instead, we're increasing the ROAS to earn back what we have lost in Wednesday, right? So hopefully this explains the whole logic and gives you two perspectives on a big time frame and at the same time small time frame, right? Adapting innovation to quality of traffic, quality of attention, right? So the big question that we're always asking is, where the attention is going, right? Because this is where, the goal of digital marketing is really just to stay relevant, right, and staying top of the mind, right? I would add that, from what we just discovered, it's also very important to stay relevant and top of mind when it matters, right? If we apply the same philosophy and the same thinking to social media, it has to do a lot about placements, right? Now, I know that the concept is let's not narrow down the placements, it's not gonna work, blah, blah, blah. Reality is that it does work when you do it right. So I wanna share two quick stories for you. First story is written on a screen. It's actually not 2020, it's 2021. Last year in August, post-iOS world, right? After iOS, probably first couple of months were a little bit scary for all of us, right? But in Sugaton, we have a vision and a goal for ourselves that every single year we want to innovate something big, something different, something new, something extraordinary, let's say, right? So I remember last summer, between June and July, what I realized is that the attention span was shifting, and it was shifting very strongly towards Reels, right? It was, I remember the Reels as a targeting option was just released, right? So it was obvious, okay, we need to make it work somehow because we know that people are spending more and more time in Reels, right? Now, how it usually goes is that, yes, everyone tests this, right? And in 99% of situations, it's not gonna work from the first time, right? So we stayed in Reels trying to find a strategy for Reels for probably for a month or so, right? Until we found the right combination, how to scale. Because again, the driving power was us being confident in ourselves and understanding that we know the human behavior, right? If you can predict human behavior on a high level, then it's just a matter of time of you figuring out the right tools or the right levers to push and making it work and cashing out. So this is a quick example of how we scaled. When Reels came last year, we had one particular account with around 20 mil lifetime ad spend, right? And in just first 3 months, this one campaign with Reels strategy scaled to the first line campaign. If we would filter by ad spend, lifetime period, it would pop out as #1 campaign in just 3 months. So 80% of ad spend was directed to Reels, and the reason why it worked is we just knew. You know how we knew? We knew from ourselves. I remember I started watching Reels myself. Like out of a sudden, I'm not watching feed, not watching stories. What I do is I watch Reels, right? I know this about me. I asked 10 other people, I asked 20 other people from different countries, from different ages, from different demographics. And if they all tell me, the same, that's where I need to go, right? Now, the reason why it worked is because in the beginning, no one was really doing that. I remember Reels CPM for millennial women in US was around $8 when we started, right? And the average US millennial woman CPM is around $40, right? So the CPMs were cheaper more than 4 times. Well, CTR was kind of the same, right? So of course, conversion rate dropped, right? But at some extent, if you are able to get cheap and high quality traffic, you'll scale like crazy, right? So this brings me to my next point, cost versus quality, right? So what we figured is the real scaling or driving power is understanding which path you need to take. So there will always be 2 paths. One path is going to be we go with expensive traffic that is high quality, right? Path number 2 is going to be we go with cheap traffic, low quality, right? Both of them will work at some extent, right? But for every single business, you need to understand which path is more scalable or which path has more potential, and you need to go all in into that path to make the actual scale happen, right? So it's all about the ratios. This is my next talking point. It's all about the ratios, it's not about number values. The best example that I always make is what we have in this box, right? Let's take AOV, conversion rate, cost per click. Now, my logic is that AOV is the stablest metric from these three metrics, right? Because conversion rate, CPC, we can easily manipulate that by just Facebook ads or TikTok ads or whatever, right? So AOV stays as our condition number one. ROAS, whatever the ROAS KPI is going to be condition number two. So for this example, I'm taking AOV as 100, Facebook last click ROAS as 1x to make it simple. The real KPI in this case is a ratio between CPC and conversion rate, and the ratio needs to be 1-to-1, right? So in all of these scenarios, it doesn't matter what your CPC is, as long as your conversion rate matches this 1-to-1, you will always get the ROAS, right? So then how can we say that this number or whatever the number is good or bad for CPC or conversion rate, right? We can't say that. Because the real KPI is ratio. It's never going to be about number values. It's never going to be about any metric alone, right? Because at the end of the day, it's still a formula. You pay a certain amount of money per visitor, certain percentage will convert for a certain amount of money on average, right? So if you start understanding formulas and start understanding ratios, and then be like, okay, so if my ratio is 1-to-1, right? And you compare it to your actual data, and you see that your ratio is like a little bit off between CPC and conversion rate, you'll always have two options. Am I gonna try to manipulate the CPC more or conversion rate more, right? Look at your data, figure out which manipulation is gonna be easier for you, and just go all in there. And eventually, the ROAS and the scale will happen automatically just by doing that. My third talking point is successful business design and KPIs. Now, I think many businesses, and I don't think I know this for a fact because we're vetting a lot of businesses. A lot of businesses come to us for a consultation. We get accesses to everything, and we have a lot of data about how overall numbers of businesses looks like, right? I know for a fact that many businesses are struggling to scale or are stuck at some point only because of their business structure, right? So here in the screen, you see what we call as the best business structure that can be out there for an e-commerce business. This is going to be your jackpot. If you can optimize your business numbers to these percentages, you're going to outscale like 99% of your competition. What I mean by outscale is that you will actually be able to afford a higher CPA than your competitors, and then at the end of the day, your ad can be, suck, your copy can suck, your offer can suck, your whole strategy can suck. But if I can pay $100 per CPA and you can pay 50, I'm gonna win at the end of the day, right? Because at the end of the day, it's still formulas and it's still numbers, right? So 10% EBITDA, I would say maybe the average for businesses is 15%, but if you're looking to exit, it's not really about the percentage of EBITDA. It's going to be either the dollar value of your last 12 trailing months EBITDA or your total revenue of last 12 trailing months, right? So if your goal is to exit in 2 to 3 years, 10% is completely enough for all of the investors and VC funds, right? 20% COGS, again, I would say the average is 25%, but this is the backstage job that you need to do to negotiate a better prices, better deals, whatever, to make it easier for your business to scale. 20% SG&A, so service general administration costs, right? So salaries, whatever, everything's in here. I wouldn't be increasing it higher than that. And the core goal is to have 50% of marketing investment, which then tells you that you need 2x MER. 2x MER is very easy, right? Average of US MER is around 2.5, Europe around X3. So we have so much you win over your competition just by that, right? That's the main idea. Now, once we have the right business structure, what is important after is that we need to set the right KPIs between all of our channels, right? So the way we do that is first starting to understand, okay, what's our percentage of our free revenue, what's percentage of our paid revenue. This is, again, the ideal scenario. That would be our target every single time. We want 40% free revenue, so all emails, SMS recurring, blah, 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 60% paid. So we keep in the same scenario, right, that we had in the previous slide. This means your MER is 2, right? We stay in the same scenario. What this means is that your paid revenue ROAS is 1.2, right? Let's keep going. In the same scenario, 1.2 ROAS KPI. Automatically, this would be the ideal split between all of the spend in all of the channels, right? So TikTok 20%, Facebook 60%, Google 20%. Google's ROAS, the ideal ROAS would be X2. The average is around X3, so you're already winning over the competition. Facebook, TikTok then only needs to give you X1. Only needs to give you X1 ROAS on last click, and you can scale. Now think about, from your own experience, how many accounts you see or you have worked on that are okay with 1x ROAS on Facebook. Not many, right? So everything starts at business setup, translates into free versus paid revenue, and then translates into all of the channels, and kaboom, you outscale others. You don't need a viral ad, you don't need fancy ad buying, you don't need anything. You outscale them by numbers. That's it from me today. You can see all of my contacts here, so whoever, if you were playing the game, right, during the presentation, upload it somewhere, tag me, mention what is this one thing, most valuable thing that you got from this presentation, and that's it.
Awesome. Put your hands together for Matas. Anybody have any questions for Matas? We have time for a question if anybody has something. I'm sure you all got his contact information as well. Anybody have any questions? One right over here. Sorry, if you use the mic, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Hey, thank you for your time, and it's a great presentation. I would like to ask about Reels. We set an ad for real estate, but when we launched campaign on Reels, we didn't get so quality traffic. Maybe you have any experience with such areas, not like e-commerce, but real estate.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I do not. Our primary focus is D2C, only e-commerce, and mostly skincare, beauty niches. So what I can give you is give you a little tip. The full setup of how Reels are working for us is 7-day click, lowest cost, Reels plus IG stories, and then going into particular audiences that we have best winners, right? The tip is that don't do default options. Like the trap is that majority of accounts, they're sitting on default parameters. That's not the way to go. You can optimize your setup way better if you'll find all of the winning parameters from all of the levers, if you know what I mean, right? Mm-hmm. So you first need to figure out your multi-level combination that works best for you, right? And then building more setups on top of that. And you'll find yourself in a place where you'll be like, okay, I got a winning ad, now I have 10 different options, 10 different setups that usually works for me. I scale it through all of my 10 setups, boom, scale.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Matas. Appreciate it. Awesome.